You don't want to miss this episode of the AI Show where we will talk about Form Recognizer with Vinod. Stay tuned. Hi, Vinod. Welcome to the AI Show. Can you introduce yourself to our guest?
Yeah, thank you, Asil. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Vinod Kurpad. I'm a product manager on the Azure Form Recognizer team. So we work primarily with all the features across Form Recognizer, and it's great to be here with you talking about Form Recognizer.
Yeah, we are so excited to hear more about what's new with Form Recognizer. Is there any new things that you want to talk about?
Oh, yes, there's a lot to unpack. So we have actually just released a new update that is in public preview starting yesterday. And so there's lots of updates. I can. Would it be easier if I just shared my screen and sort of walked you through some of the capabilities that we're talking about?
That would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. Let's do that. So let me know when you can see this. Yeah.
This one? Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, like I mentioned, there's a lot going on in Form Recognizer. What I'd like to do is maybe just walk you through some of the updates that we've sort of released, right? So there's lots to unpack. The latest update we had launched yesterday. It's a public preview, and within this public preview, we now have a new model to deal with unstructured documents. So Form Recognizer in the past, we've had a lot of different scenarios where you could use structured forms as well as some semi-structured forms. But now we're working on a new model architecture, a new model type that allows you to work with unstructured documents as well. There's
What do you mean by structured and unstructured exactly?
Oh, yeah. So if you think about documents, let me maybe just zip ahead a little bit, and then we can talk about this in a second, right? So, right. Think about documents. There's documents come in a variety of different formats. They can be like, for example, PDFs and different types of documents. But within each of these documents, you could have different types of content embedded within it, right? So if you look at this slide from left to right, you'll see that there's structured documents on the far left to fairly unstructured documents on the far right, right? So as you think about all the different scenarios that you have in terms of what data you want to be able to extract from each of these documents, you need to use different techniques in order to deal with some of the challenges as you come across documents that are either highly structured or highly unstructured. So for example, in things like documents on the far right where it's unstructured, we've got a model architecture now that can actually look at both layout signals as well as language signals to determine what is it that you're most interested in from this document and what is the different ways that this information can be represented. And it tries to use that information to then determine what values it wants to extract from the document for each of the different fields that you're trying to extract information for.
This is really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so like I said, right? I mean, there's a lot of information. So maybe what I wanted to start though with was the a quick overview of where we are at today, right? So one thing that I wanted to share was a quick pricing update. You'll notice that the general document API, which is currently in public preview, as well as the invoice API, which is a generally available API, have both dramatically dropped in price. So for customers who were on the fence or considering how they might want to use these APIs, this might be the impetus that they need to start using it, because again, at this price point, it really makes it compelling for a lot of those high volume scenarios.
This is great news.
Right. So in addition to that, right, so I've got a few other updates I wanted to share. We talked a little bit about the new model architecture to deal with unstructured documents. There's a new W-2 pre-built model. We're coming up on tax season here in the US. Everybody's probably thinking about getting their paperwork together. So the new W-2 model is something that both tax processors as well as a lot of organizations that deal with sort of income verification or other scenarios like that would find super useful in terms of extracting the right values or extracting the right fields from each of these documents. And I'll be showing you a quick demo of how you could do that for yourself in the Form Recognizer Studio, or actually use it at scale using the REST APIs or the SDK as well. And then there is the update to the invoice model. So the invoice model has an additional set of fields that we're able to extract now. These additional fields are things that customers have been asking for in terms of saying, like, for example, there's some things about VAT and other fields like that. But we also have a new Spanish language invoice model. So the procurement scenario just gets a lot easier for organizations that are dealing with English as well as Spanish documents with the new Spanish invoice model. And then finally, we're continuing to make improvements across the board. The general document model now has support for selection marks, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we sort of go through the overview of what each of these APIs are. And the Read API is now available with Form Recognizer as well. We continue to make improvements across all the different languages, and now we're up to 164 different languages that we can support. So there's a ton to unpack, like I just said. So feel free to stop and ask me questions as I go through this, because I know if you have some questions, our viewers probably have the same questions as well.
You are filled with great gifts to us. 164 languages
Yes, we're up to 164 languages. We're not stopping. We're going to keep going. It's just a question of making sure that we understand there's customers across the globe who want these capabilities to work across all the different languages that they're dealing with, and so we're on that quest to solve those challenging problems for most customers.
Great.
So, I guess any questions as we go through this?
Not yet. I'm sure we will have more.
Okay, perfect. So I wanted to give a quick overview of what Form Recognizer really is, right? Because there's probably going to be a wide variety of people tuning in. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what Form Recognizer is and sort of how you might want to think about using it. So if you think about Form Recognizer, it's really a set of APIs primarily tasked around the information extraction and sort of task of working with documents. So the easiest way to think about it is if you look at this particular slide that I have on the page, if you read it left to right, you start with the Read API. The Read API extracts all the text from a document. So if you have a document that contains, for example, an image or a PDF file, you run it through Form Recognizer, through the Read API, you get all of the text that you extracted that we can extract out of the document. In addition to just extracting the text, we're also able to do some language detection. So we're able to give you language detection at the line level spans, right? So you can see what are the different languages that are within this document, and you know where those what spans of text are which language as you go through this Read API. The next step out from there is layout, and layout extracts not just the output of text or the text, but it also extracts some of the structure. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through a couple of quick demos. The next API you can think about is the general key value pairs API or the document API. And this is a great example of how you could use Form Recognizer to just get started on any document type. So it's a pre-trained model, and I'll show you a little bit more about how you could use that as you extract key value pairs and now selection marks as well. And then you get to the set of pre-built models. And within the pre-built models, you have a few different pre-built models that you can choose from. I'll give you a quick walkthrough of what those are, but there's a bigger list coming up in a second here. And finally, if you really reach a scenario where you have a document type that doesn't quite fit any of these molds, you can go off and go build your own custom model to extract the right fields or extract the right values that you want out of these documents using the custom model approach. And we're going to take a quick look at how you can build a custom model for yourself as well. Mm-hmm. So if you think about Form Recognizer from a sort of capability perspective, it's about extracting the structure of a document, running that through a inferencing model that then allows you to extract either the specific fields that you want using a pre-built model, or use a custom model to then generate those custom fields or extract those custom fields that you're looking for. And again, it's all a set of APIs. So once you have a model built, or once you have a pre-trained model that you want to use, it's really simple to connect it. For Office users, for folks who are not comfortable with writing any code, there's great ways to do this. You can use all of the Office tooling using AI Builder and things like that to integrate Form Recognizer into your Office workflows. For customers that are developers or for Azure users, there's obviously a plethora of Azure services you can connect to. There's Logic apps, there's web apps, there's knowledge mining, there's a whole host of things like Synapse as well for analytics. There's a whole host of different ways that you can connect to this data. And finally, for the low-code, no-code solution, there's also the Power Platform integration in order to achieve this sort of workflow that you might want to create with your documents.
I wanted to clarify, before, I think our developers needed to go to image for extracting the text from the image to OCR, and then for language detection, they would go to the text analytics. Now they're just using Form Recognizer to do all of these things at once, right?
Yeah, so Read API used to be part of computer vision, and it's still part of computer vision. But what we recognize is there's a lot of customers that actually use Form Recognizer that could still benefit from using the Read API as well. And so just making it easier for them to do all the things that they want to do in one spot. So it's, if you've got a lot of documents, you want to run that through Read and just get the output from or as text, and that's all the scenario that you're working on requires. There's an easy way to do that using Form Recognizer as well now. But if you wanted to do more and actually work with layout and then work with custom text and work with custom models, you can continue to evolve your application or your scenario to use all the other components that are available with Form Recognizer as well now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I thought we could do, maybe just do a really quick demo. We'll talk a little bit about all these things in the context of the Form Recognizer Studio, right? And the reason I think this is interesting is because the Studio itself is fairly new as well. The Studio is something that we released probably about 4 months ago, 3-4 months ago, I guess now. But it is the sort of default experience that we're continuing to build on moving forward. So for customers who've used Form Recognizer in the past, you're probably used to seeing the sample labeling tool, which is sort of the older version of the labeling experience. If you haven't used the Studio yet, I'd highly encourage you to go do that. This is where the continued investments in the Form Recognizer UX is going to be. And please go try the Studio. Let us know what you think as well. Right?
I love the Studio.
So within the Studio, you have obviously all of the capabilities we just talked about, right? So I'll really quick just jump through each one of them, walk through them, and share some quick insights into how you might want to use this, right? So the first API we'll start with is Read. I can go ahead and use some of the sample documents here to analyze each of the documents here, or I can go ahead and add a new document that I wanted to, right? You do need to do a quick configuration on the Studio. You need to actually configure the Studio for use by pointing it at the Azure resource that you want to use, so the Azure Form Recognizer resource that you want to use. The other note that I wanted to call out is the Studio does require you to be logged into the Azure portal for you to use. So it's sort of uses the same authentication and authorization mechanism as the portal. So you can see I just hit analyze on a document. I now have all the text that was extracted as part of this. So if I had a scenario where I just needed to digitize some documents, this is a great example of how I could use that. I don't need to do anything more, and the Read API solves that problem for me. It also gives me the language information that we were talking about. So you can see that there's obviously the content element here, but it also tells me what are the different languages across the different spans.
Vinod, so, can you zoom in a little bit? It's hard for me to see.
Oh yeah, so Windows Shift Plus, right?
Yes.
Is that the? So the next thing we should probably talk about as we go through this, and also if there's any questions, feel free to interrupt and let me know if there's things that we need to stop and take questions on, because it'd probably be easier to do that as people have questions. We might want to just stop and answer those.
Because we're going to cut this section out, we take the questions afterwards. Because
okay.
Okay.
Sounds perfect. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the layout API next, right? And so the layout API is where we start actually getting out of extracting just the text to really working on using some pre-built models or unsupervised models to extract more than just the text. So we're working on structure extraction here. And you can see that I can take a simple document, run that through layout. And within the Studio, I get all of the elements that we're extracting out of layout. You'll notice that there's a few different layers that I can turn on and off here, right? So I can start with text. If I turn that off, you can see that it tells you all the different elements of the text blocks that we're extracting. It identifies tables as well. So this is a great unsupervised way for you to extract tables. There's no training required. The layout API understands how data is structured and is then able to use that structure information to define what the tables are and what each of those cells are. So here's an example of one where we define two separate tables. This one has a couple of rows in it, and this one has a few more rows in it. So there's two separate tables within this document, and all of that information is just contained within the API response you get. And finally, it's also able to extract selection marks or checkboxes. And you can see that in this case, it's telling you that there's a selection mark, there's the bounding boxes associated with it, and it's telling you whether it's selected or unselected. So the layout API gives you these building blocks to now use to build out a more complex solution, because you started with the Read API that just gave you text. Now you've got some selection marks, tables, and structure, and you can use this to sort of do some more interesting things. We're continuing to work on improvements to layout. So you'll see in the future, we're going to work on things like being able to decompose the document into a more finer grain. And so there's going to be things like paragraphs and things like that'll also continue to sort of evolve as we go through the next iteration of layout.
This is really impressive.
Yeah, so it's starting to sort of like get into more of the core aspects of what we do within Form Recognizer, right? So the other thing that I'll also share is Form Recognizer is sort of a additive set of APIs. So, for example, when I'm going to share with you the next API, which is General Document, you will get all the things that the General Document API can do, but you'll also get all the things that Layout could do as well. So it's not, you don't really have to say like, oh, I needed some things from General Document, but I also need some things from Layout. I need to call these two APIs separately. You don't need to. They're all as part of the same response. So you get all the outputs from each of these APIs sort of paired together. So let's look at the General Document API. And the General Document API is awesome for a lot of these scenarios where you have just general forms that you need to extract text from, or that you need to extract these values from. And what the General Document API does is it actually extracts each of these key value pairs, and it produces a result that would look something like this. For example, in this particular document, we're able to look at each of these values and say like, oh, for example, this is a key here. The key here is this 2BSEE operator. And the value is this number that is 77337, right? So this is great because now I can take this information, process it through a downstream application. Like there may be an application that processes application forms that are coming in, and I can extract all the information, put it into whatever a SQL database or a like a unstructured database. However, this might be, whether it's Cosmos DB, MongoDB, whatever that downstream application might be, can now take this information as is and just use it and run with it. The key difference is
color coding, and also anyone who is not a developer can just use this tool and see what can be taken out from these documents too.
Exactly, right. So the studio is a great way for you to play with it. So you can essentially throw in a new document in here and use that to now extract key value pairs and see if your document type will work, right? So most common patterns are customers will come here, try this out and say like, hey, I've got this one document. Let me see what I can get out of it. They try it out. They say, oh, this looks good. And now they know exactly what the API is going to look like because they have some sample code that tells them how to call the API. They know exactly what the result's going to look like. So they know what they want to extract out of this result. And so it's super easy to now go build your application based on just putting a simple document into the UX, testing it out, validating that it works, and you're off and running now.
This is great.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I wanted to call out is there's absolutely nothing more than just calling REST APIs involved at this point, right? So you're just essentially calling REST APIs, making sure that you can send in a document, get some analysis results. So you're not having to build any models. Just like the layout API, you can extract tables as well. The difference between the selection marks here versus selection marks that we looked at layout is selection marks or checkboxes within General Document API returns both the selection box, which is the box itself and the value, whether it's selected or unselected, but it also returns the key. So in this case, you can see that I have 4 separate checkboxes. If I just had checkbox values, then I'd have to do, using the layout, I'd have to try to figure out, okay, which one of these is selected. But now with the General Document API, I actually know which of these was selected versus which of those was unselected. So it's an easier way for you to process these forms where there's a lot of checkboxes. You now get the keys that are associated with each of those checkboxes as well. And finally, the last bit that I wanted to share in terms of what the General Document API does is it also extracts all the entities that are available within this document, right? So one common sort of scenario that you might want to think about is you might want to say, oh, did I get a contact name, and is that a person or is that an organization? So for example, you might want to say, I want to work with only organizations, and I don't want people to submit information. And you might want to say, did I get an organization or a name as the contact information? The other thing you could do is also do things like validations on emails, right? So you can say like, oh, this is an email. So it's a valid email as long as the entity identifies that it's a valid email. I now know that I've got the right value in each of these fields. So there's a lot to do that you can sort of use both the entities as well as the key value pairs that are extracted to be more effective in your downstream processing of this data. And then finally, we'll talk a little bit about the pre-built models. The pre-built models, again, I'll start with Spanish because this is relatively new. It's as of yesterday. So the Spanish language model essentially allows you to use a Spanish language invoice. We are able to extract all the fields that you typically extract from an invoice. The difference between a pre-built model and the general document model is the pre-built model uses a defined field name or defined taxonomy. So in this case, for example, customer address may not necessarily show up anywhere on here as customer address, but it's able to extract the fact that this is the customer address, and it's extracting it as this particular field. So it helps with some of that downstream processing again, where you know exactly what the field name is going to look like. Whereas in the general document model, the field name is not always going to be consistent because you might have customer one calling it, whatever customer address, the other one might just call it address. And so there might be different ways in which the same information is represented. And so you're going to have to deal with a little bit of that variation and sort of account for that transformation that you might have to do on the end.
That's great.
Right. So those were some of the updates we have in the pre-built models. The new W2 model is something that I wanted to also share. The W2 model again is brand new. It's in preview right now. You can see it's a model that can extract W2s both as a single page W2 as well as a multi W2, right? So because if you notice W2s, you might have noticed that there are some organizations that will send you 5 separate W2s on the same page. So in order for you to extract that or process a document that looks like this, you still need the ability to then identify that it's actually the same form represented 4 separate times. And so the model is able to do all of that to then extract the right values from the form. This is
great news for America.
This is exactly, it makes tax filing so much easier for both tax professionals as well as individuals, right? So that's the key part. And it's not just tax, right? So if you think about, anytime you applied for a loan, like a mortgage or an auto loan or something like that, there's income verification that banks need to do. And so there's a lot of those scenarios as well that you really think about. There's a lot of financial scenarios where income verification is a core part, and W-2 is probably one of the most common forms that people use as sort of income.
This is great even for personal use to digitalize your forms and then being able to search for it, right? Just taking a picture doesn't do that.
Exactly, right? So digitizing your information and making it searchable, this is exactly what we do, right? So that the knowledge mining pattern, for example, is one easy example of doing that. But from a sort of personal records perspective as well, right? So you have all of your documents, you just run them through Form Recognizer, you get all of this information, and then you can then easily find the right documents that you're looking for.
Yeah, health data and every other thing that you have too, which is awesome. One thing that you didn't show us, there was a tab for code. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, okay, so, you mean which one in all right, okay. Yeah. So this tab, yeah. So if you think about what we're trying to do here, we're trying to make it really easy for you as a developer to start using Form Recognizer, right? And in this case, what we're doing is we've given you a quick sample code of saying, like, here's how you go ahead and use. This is essentially the code that this is the Python code that this particular API is being used within the studio, right? So you can see that you just put in your Form Recognizer endpoint, your Form Recognizer key, and then we point to this particular sample document that you can get to, or you can replace this reference with a reference to a document that is within a storage account that you have maybe. And just run this code at that point, and you can get all the same outputs that Form Recognizer is generating in the studio, and you're able to then use that as sort of your sample example to get started with, right? So it's a really good quick start in terms of how you use each of these different capabilities without actually having to go figure out, this is a type of document field, and then what do I need to do with the document field? It's the content property within a document field. We do all of that for you, and we just give you a set of quick steps.
I love it.
To get started.
I love it. It's amazing, and you can download or copy it. Makes it very, very easy before you dive into the documentation.
Yeah, exactly, right. So the typical workflow we see a lot of customers doing is saying, okay, I'm going to bring a simple document, add it in here, just click the add button, add a document in, analyze it, validate that it works. Once I have that done, then I can just go copy this code out from here, put a few, fill out a few of these variables of what is my service name, what is my key, point it to a document, and I can actually run this and see that it actually works on my documents as well.
Great.
Right. So, so that's a lot of what we've talked about so far, which is really around all the things that we're doing to help you to the point where you have a document that it works, and you have a good way to extract the fields that you need, whether it's a pre-built model or it's a pre-trained model like the general document model. Let's talk a little bit now about a document type, for example, where you might find that that there's things in this document that don't quite work with any of these different document types, right? So let's maybe pop back over to the slides a little bit, and then we talked about the slide around structured and unstructured documents. So if you have a document that maybe looks like this, right? So you've got in this case, it's a power of attorney, but there may be other document types that you're dealing with, right? And so how do you extract the right values that you want from each of these different document types? So I'm going to give you a quick demo of what the studio experience looks like for you to go create a custom model to do this. So I'm going to pop back into the studio, and in the studio, I'm going to go select the custom tile, right? And within the custom tile, the first thing you'll notice is you have two options, right? So you can train a template model that we talked about, which is really a model that works well with highly structured documents and documents that have a really defined structure, like a W-9 in this case is a really good example of that. Or you could have a document that deals with things like a rental contract or things like that, right? So in this case, I've gone ahead and created a quick project. To create a project, all you need to do is point the studio to a storage account that contains your PDF files. And the first thing we do is we OCR each of these files. So we run layout on each of these files, and then we give you this labeling experience, right? So I've already gone ahead and labeled most of this document, but I've specifically left out one or two little pieces so we can sort of walk through what that might look like as we do this, right? So the first thing you come in here and you do is you click on each of your documents, ensure that that's run layout, and you can tell that by this little yellow hue around the text. You know that layout's available, and you can start labeling. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new field. So in this case, I've already labeled all of this data, but I purposely left out one particular field. So in this case, I'm really interested in saying when was this actual agreement made. So I'm looking for an agreement date. So I'm just going to create a new field called agreement date here. And it's edited at the very bottom down here. Is this good enough? Are you having trouble seeing this, or is this?
Yeah, my vision is not very good, but you're good.
Okay, perfect. So all I need to do in order to label this field is I just go select the text that I'm interested in. So in this case, it's the Jan 10, 2011 date. I can either select that agreement date from the drop down here, or I can go click on the agreement date here. So either option works. And as soon as I do that, you'll notice that it's added the value of Jan 10th, 2011 to that agreement value. So and the next thing you'll notice is each of these documents has a completely different structure, right? So this particular document looks like this. The next document looks super different, but you'll see that again, it has the same information, but it's just represented differently in each of these different places. So all I need to do is go ahead and label each of these documents again, right? So there's things that are the information is again represented slightly differently in each of these documents, but it's contextually it's the same thing. It's just the agreement date. So once I go do this with all the documents, I can now run this, or I can actually train a model to extract all of these fields, right? So the fields that I'm interested in, for example, in this case is, I'm looking for who are the two parties. So who's the landlord and who's the tenant? What's the landlord address? And then I'm looking for other bits of information that I'm really interested in, which is, for example, what is the rent? What is the advance? And then so I'm also trying to do something interesting here with clauses, right? So I'm trying to identify if, for example, there's a clause that stipulates that the renter cannot sublet this property, right? So I'm looking for that to see, like, is there a clause that enables that, right? So in this case, if you look in here, there's a clause that says cannot sublet or lease. So I'm trying to identify things like that as well to see if there's information that I can capture. So at this point, I've taken all of my documents, I've labeled it with all of the different values, and you can see it's there's really not a lot to be done here, right? So you can start with as few as 5 sample documents, right? You don't need anything more than 5 sample documents to get started. So that's the really interesting part about Form Recognizer. We make it super easy for you to get started, right? So 5 documents. If I need to label it, this whole thing, I could have done it probably in about a half hour, maybe 40 minutes with 5 documents, right? So that it's a fair number of fields. So at this point, I go ahead and hit the train. So now I give it a model name, and I'm going to call this the AI show model because obviously need to make sure we make it contextual. And here's where it gets interesting, right? So you now have the option to choose from one of the 2 model architectures. And the reason this is here is because we use the exact same labeling structure in terms of labeling your documents for either model. So you don't have to make choices beforehand to say, oh, which model do I want to pick? And so do I have to label things differently? No, you just go label your documents, start with just 5 documents. That's as easy as it gets. And then you come in here and you pick the right model architecture that you want to use to train your model. In this case, again, going back to the slides we looked at earlier, I know it's an unstructured document. I know there's lots of variations in these documents. So I know the neural model is the one that I want to pick. So I just pick the neural model and I hit train. And we talked a little bit more about the details of what these 2 model architectures are, how they're different. But it typically takes about 20 to 30 minutes for you to train a neural model, right? So that training process is kicked off and it started. But like any good cooking show, while that is cooking, I already have a pre-cooked sort of sample for us to look at, right? So here's an example of a sample model that I trained earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and click into that, make sure that I'm using that particular model. I'm going to add a new document. And this is a document that I held out of my training set. This is not a document that we looked at, for example, when we were labeling. This is a document that the model hasn't seen before. So I'm going to open that and I click analyze. And you'll see that the process of the API calls across, whether it is a pre-built model or a custom model, is identical. And so it's really easy for you to sort of once you get a hang of the APIs, it's really easy for you to work with them to get better at sort of doing this on the fly. And you can see I got a agreement date. The agreement date is perfectly picked out based on the value that I provided. I'm looking at the landlord address here. And if you notice the landlord address, you might think like, oh my gosh, it's picked out this whole span of text as the landlord address. But the actual value is exactly what I expected it to be, right? Which is down here is the value. The only reason you're seeing this is within the studio, we don't really draw polygons, we just draw rectangles. And so as this text spans across 2 different lines, it's looking at the min x, min y, max x, max y, whatever those coordinates are, and then drawing out the polygon, out the rectangle based on that. And that's sort of the reason that it looks like it's picking a lot more information than it should, but it's actually picking the right information that it needs to. Similarly, it's picking out the right landlord, the right tenant. It's picking out the rental address. Again, the rental address has this polygon problem, but it's still the right value, so that we're still good. Rent amount, it's picking the right amount. It's telling you when the rent due date is. It's before the 5th of every month, and so forth, right? So it's doing perfectly exactly what I wanted it to do, right? And it's even able to pick out the sublet clause by telling me that you do not have the permission to sublet or sublease this property. And finally, it's also telling me what, in this case, I annotated or labeled some of the tenant paid services, and it's telling me that the tenant should pay for the electricity bill, which is one of the things that this contract stipulates is a tenant paid service. So it's about 30 minutes or about 40 minutes if you start with a lot more data like I did, to go from starting with a bunch of documents to getting to the point where you have an AI model that can actually extract all of these unstructured fields from these documents using Form Recognizer. So that's sort of the pitch that I wanted to share with you today, because this is a super compelling experience as you think about all of the different organizations. Like organizations today deal with a ton of unstructured documents, and just being able to extract the values from them as not just structured fields, but unstructured documents, that's a really important problem that we think is core to a lot of organizations today.
I love it. I mean, as a person who builds a lot of prototypes to see if things work well, this is amazing because anyone without the technical knowledge can train in different models, can pick up the layout and everything that's important before a developer gets to work on it. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So that is the core value of what we provide. It's like, it's a developer building an AI model that has high accuracy, high precision, high recall. Right. So that's the core value proposition for Form Recognizer today.
This is really cool. And I'm going to train privacy documentations that nobody reads, and maybe we'll be able to read them now.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So bring your data set, give it a shot, try it out, see if it works for you. Because if you've got enough documents that you can label, you will all definitely find that we're able to extract the right values that you're looking for. So I did wanted to maybe share a really quick example of like one other thing that, as we talked about this, right? So I'm picking up a different document structure here, and this is one where I wanted to train a template model. Right, and the template model has a few additional benefits that you can do today, which the neural model cannot yet. And we're working on sort of closing that gap in terms of making sure that there's feature parity across both model types. But if you think about the capability here, it's about extracting structured fields, right? And so in this case, I've got this table of information that I want to extract as a structured field, right? So I don't really know how many rows of information might be there. There's this document that has a few different rows. There's a different set of rows in the next document, and so forth, right? So this capability within the structured field extraction or the table extraction allows you to now extract all of these rows of information as a set of structured fields. So now you get a repeating row, a set of repeating rows that you can sort of iterate over to say like, okay, how many rows were contained within this document, and what were each of the values for each of the columns within each row. So just wanted to share this as another sort of a value proposition as you think about, like, we're not just about extracting key value pairs, but we're also working on extracting structured fields or tables. And that gives you now the flexibility to work with documents that have different structures associated with them as well.
Thank you. This is great.
Awesome. And then the one thing that I wanted to maybe just reiterate as we go through this is there are a few sort of things that you need to be aware of, or things that you need to sort of think through as you go through this process, right? So for example, we talked about, you can start with just 5 samples of your document, which is really all you need to get started. You need to configure your storage account for use with the studio, which requires you to set up cores. It's a simple process. It's described in the documentation, but it's just making sure the customers are aware that they need to do that before they can actually use it. And then you go through the labeling experience. We looked at what that labeling experience looks like. When you talk about the labeling experience, just be aware that there are certain fields that are available in the document model or the neural model that are, there's certain fields that are available in the template model or the custom form model that are not available yet in the neural model. So if you do have a data set that you've already labeled for a template model and you use it for a neural model, it'll just tell you that, hey, you got some things that are labeled that I really don't know how to use. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to ignore them, right? So it'll still train you a model, but it'll just ignore the fields that you've labeled as either a structured field or a region or a signature. So those are all things that will just skip over because it just doesn't know how to process those yet, right? It will in a little bit of time. And then the other thing that we need to think about is planning for variability, right? So as you think about this, think about it as you've got maybe 5 different, let's maybe pick a simple example. Let's just say it's a donations form, right? You've got 5 different variations of a donations form because you're working with 5 different organizations, and each of them has a slightly different template. They're still very similar, but slightly different in each case, right? For example, maybe our organization name is in the top right corner versus the bottom left corner in one or the other. So in those cases, with the template model, you'd have to train a model for each of those variations, and then you could compose each of those variations together into a single model. And so when you analyze the document, it performs a classification, identifies which of these models is best suited for this document, and then runs that particular model on that document, produces a result. Whereas with the new neural model, You don't need to do that. So with the new neural model, you just throw in more label data or more samples that describe some of these variations, and the model is able to learn about these variations, generalize across those variations, and extract the right values as it goes through. So that's another key benefit of why you might want to think about the neural model, right? So for customers where you might say, I might have thousands of vendors, I have thousands of different formats that are coming in, I don't have the ability to train a model for each one of those, the neural model is great for that.
Yeah.
Right. And then finally, the one last thing that I'll also mention is the neural model currently is a English only model, right? So if you think about some of the key sort of differences between the two, the neural model being an English only model, it requires you to essentially train only English documents through the neural model. Any other languages, any of the other 164 languages that we support are still available for you to use, but you'd have to use the template model for those.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, we did look at this. The neural model takes about 30 minutes to train. The template model takes only about a minute or two to train. So it'll take you just about a minute to go ahead and train a neural model, a template model. But you have to still deal with some of these challenges around variations and things like that. So it's a question of understanding what your scenario is, defining what your characteristics are of the documents you're dealing with, and then picking the right solution that meets your needs. So making sure that you're aware that there's some language constraints to be aware of, there's some format constraints to be aware of, and there's some training time constraints to be aware of. So as you think through this, that should help you understand like which of those two options will provide the best results depending on the scenario you're working on.
Thank you for these tips. I mean, they're really useful, and this chart too.
Yeah. So again, right, all of this is documented in the documentation. We made a big sort of push to improve our documentation to sort of support some of the feedback that we got based on prior releases, as well as making sure that all the documentation is up to date given what we're releasing now. So if you have any feedback on the product or your experience using either the studio, the documentation, or even the APIs or the SDK, absolutely, please do reach out and let us know. That would be great for us to hear.
Where would be a good place to reach out?
So there is, I guess, a form recognizer contact as email. I can make sure that I share that with you, and we can add that to the slides, or we can add that to the live stream. But I can definitely share that with you in a minute here.
Great. And lastly, where can people learn more about Form Recognizer and the capabilities?
So Form Recognizer is, I'd start with the documentation, obviously. The docs are the best place to start. There's a lot of information now. We've updated our quick starts. We updated a bunch of how-tos in terms of like how you get started. If you don't find that there's enough information there, obviously let us know. But there's also a lot of samples that we have in terms of like using the SDKs, using the REST APIs, making sure that you can use some of the other Azure services like Logic Apps or even knowledge mining and Synapse. So there's a number of different samples that we have out there that you could try out as well. I'd say if none of those work, feel free to reach out. I would be happy to help you sort of answer any of your questions and make sure that we can turn your questions into either documentations or samples that others who might have had the same question would probably benefit from as well.
Yeah, and it's very easy to give the feedback on the documentation. There's just a button that you can click and give it right there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'd say that would be the definitely one of the ways that you could reach us.
And you can try the Form Recognizer Studio, aka.ms/Form Recognizer Studio. I love it. It's super helpful. And thank you so much. Is there anything last thoughts that you want to add?
I would love to hear feedback in terms of absolutely hearing from everybody who's tried it out in terms of what their experience was. We're continuing to work on improvements to the service. So absolutely, AI quality improvements are definitely one thing. Features are another thing. So there's a whole host of sort of momentum around this. The team's been working really hard, and we've shared only a few things that we've got right now, but we continue to work on making things better.
And it looks like you managed to make things much better. Thank you so much to you and everybody who works on it. This is really exciting, and you gave us lots of good news today.
Thank you, Iskal. It's been a pleasure being with you.
In today's episode, we talked with Vinod about the Form Recognizer, the new studio experience, and the new models that allows you to detect tax forms. Thank you for joining.